And we are monitoring the situation unfolding in the capital of Qatar. Just moments ago, the Israeli military says it conducted a strike against senior Hamas leadership there. There have been multiple explosions reported in the capital of Doha. This is just happening now, and Dan Hoffman, our Fox News contributor, joins us on the phone. Some people think this is 2 years too late, that Qatar was harboring Hamas leadership for years on end and giving them billions of dollars, and now apparently they are no longer given safe harbor in Doha. Dan, over to you.
Yeah, there's clearly no safe zone for Hamas, and this is an escalation by Israel. But it's worth emphasizing that there was a Hamas delegation in Doha led by their leader Khalil al-Hayya, and another senior official, their co-chair, Khalid Mishal, who spent a lot of time in Doha. They were meeting with senior Iranian officials, including the Iranian foreign minister. And so Israel decided to take this opportunity to take out the Hamas terrorist leadership. There are issues here, intelligence questions about, obviously they knew where these guys were, but all the work that the Israelis had to do to ensure that there was no collateral damage on innocent civilians in Qatar's capital city. It's an escalation diplomatically, and Israel will have to deal with the ramifications of that in their bilateral relationship with Doha. But Israel has emphasized that if Hamas doesn't release all the hostages, then Israel will take further action and escalate their strikes in Gaza and their military operations there. And obviously that now it's clear it doesn't exclude Israeli operations outside of Israel.
Bill Hemmer is with me as well, in case you want to jump in.
Dan, when you think about the war in Gaza and the warning that Netanyahu gave those in Gaza City, just even 48 hours ago, for up to 20,000 residents there to move out. So they're making a move on that city, and at the same time they're going after the leadership. What's the impact of taking out the leadership with regard to the war in Gaza?
I think if you ask General Jack Keane, he'll tell you that Hamas is going to carry on fighting. Israel is engaged in an insurgency right now. And even if Israel is able to decapitate Hamas, which they largely have, Hamas is down to, way down the line from their battalion commanders who've just been decimated by Israeli strikes. But Hamas is continuing to fight. And in a classical sense, and I can tell you from my experience serving in Iraq during our counterinsurgency in 2006 to 2008, the goal is to try to divide the innocent civilian population from the irreconcilable terrorists and think about what the post-conflict reconstruction plan is going to look like. Israel hasn't done that. They have taken the fight to Hamas effectively, but it's the question of what next. And that's one of the reasons I think why almost 3 years into this war, or 2 years into this war, there's concern, certainly among Israel's staunchest supporters, including Germany and Australia and France. They're all talking about recognizing a Palestinian state in the next UN General Assembly.
One of the things I think is interesting is the fact that just a few weeks ago you had President Trump, reinforcing his commitment to whatever Bibi Netanyahu decided to do. And I think one of the very real frustrations inside Israel and then around the world, if you support Israel, is that there are many people who believe that Qatar could have pressed Hamas to release the hostages on October 8th, that they are, this is not my words, but some will say, complicit in continuing this war, because Israel has maintained that the war could end tomorrow or right now if the hostages release. And now I believe that Israel doesn't want to go into a third anniversary of October 7th with these hostages still underground.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Qatar has the leverage anymore to influence on the ground how Hamas is dealing with the hostages. And I would just emphasize that for Hamas, the war is their oxygen. They're going to lose every battle. There's no question about that. But they feel like they're winning the propaganda war because they are embedded with the civilian population. And in order to take the fight to the terrorists, Israel is accepting a certain level of collateral damage on the civilian population, on infrastructure, on buildings. We've just seen that in Gaza. it's an extraordinarily challenging urban environment for the Israeli military. I've never felt like Doha has the leverage to do anything about it. But I think what Israel is saying that, look, if Hamas wants to carry on their relationship with Iran, they can do so at their own peril. That was the message today.
You know, Dan, one of the many things we learned when we went into Gaza in August is that you have 2 million people who are trying to live there, and it is a very difficult and harsh life. And what the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, told us is that he believes there are 20,000 Hamas fighters who are still alive and willing to carry on the fight. I don't know how you separate 20,000 fighters from 2 million civilians. But the big challenge within Gaza is how you're able to successfully feed and house to an extent and give medical care to 2 million people while you're trying to root out a guerrilla war in an urban area. And Dan, you know, this is a significant challenge if you're trying to succeed. And I think it's a fair question to ask, can it be done?
It's almost an insurmountable challenge, Bill. From my experience on the ground in the Middle East, in Iraq, look, Hamas is deliberately putting Palestinian civilians in harm's way. They are preventing civilians from evacuating areas where they know the Israelis are planning strikes. Typically, when you're talking about targeting 20,000 Hamas terrorists and protecting the rest of the population, the millions of the population, you need a lot of boots on the ground. And we saw that with the surge when we surged U.S. troops and supporting elements to Iraq to help make that happen. I'm not sure that Israel has the wherewithal to do that. They are stretched thin. Israel was meant to fight short wars and win them quickly. This is already an extraordinarily long and extremely costly war for Israel.
Dan Hoffman, thank you for getting on the phone with us. Yeah. And it is 10 a.m. Eastern. This is America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino with my cohort.
Hello to you. Yeah, I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning at home. This is significant news, as we've reported here. Trey Yingst, our correspondent in the Middle East for the past 7 years, right now is on duty covering the war in Kyiv, Ukraine, and joins us live. And Trey, you've been reaching out to people back in the Middle East. What have you found, and what should we report now at this hour? Hello.
Yeah, Bill, good morning. Fox News can confirm the Israelis were behind these strikes targeting Hamas leadership in the Qatari capital of Doha. Just about an hour ago, explosions were reported there, followed by video of black smoke rising from the horizon. I have reached out to Hamas leadership, Qatari officials, and Israeli officials. Israeli officials say they were going after two key individuals in Hamas leadership. We're talking about Khalil al-Hayya and Zahir Jabarin. This is the deputy political bureau leader of Hamas and also one of the finance ministers of the organization. Remember, Hamas consolidated power in Doha as the war inside Gaza developed. Many of their leaders were based out of the Qatari capital, but it was when Ismail Haniyeh went to the Iranian capital of Tehran for the inauguration of Masoud Pezeshkian, the incoming Iranian president at the time, when he was killed. That is when the leadership in Doha made a council of about 5 people who were responsible for negotiating the possible release of hostages from Gaza and the potential of a ceasefire agreement. At least 2 of these individuals were the targets of these strikes, according to Israeli officials. We do not know the outcome of these strikes and whether or not they were successful in killing these Hamas leaders. I do want to give you the Qatari reaction. I reached out to a Qatari official in Doha who responded with a statement from the spokesman for Qatar's foreign minister, saying in part, quote, the state of Qatar condemns in the strongest terms the cowardly Israeli attack targeting the residential headquarters of several members of the Hamas political bureau in the Qatari capital, Doha. It's quite a lengthy statement, but it goes on to talk about the state of Qatar and their condemnation of these strikes earlier today. One important note here, Bill, is talking about the Al Udeid Air Base. This is the largest U.S. base in the Middle East that is very close to where these strikes took place, and questions today about what the Americans knew ahead of this operation. Bill?
Wow. Trey, a lot more to get to. Thank you for that. The latest headlines as we watch that story develop literally in front of us for the past 30 minutes or so. So much more to come on that. Trey, thanks to you in Ukraine.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.